What is going on, Babylonians? It's me, Songs of Rays, and today we're looking into a different game. And the first time on this channel, we're looking at Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Now, Tiny Tina Wonderlands, if you've had your head under a rock, is made by the exact same people that made Borderlands 1, 2, and 3, and also the pre-sequel, but I don't really like to talk about one. That was the one I never really got on with, but it's made by the same people, so Gearbox Software and also 2K Games, and it's basically gone into a slightly different direction from normal Borderlands in the way that it's kind of heavily inspired by probably the best DLC that ever came out for Borderlands, which is the Dragon's Keep DLC that came out for Borderlands 2. And this one's gone for a very RPG, very kind of Dungeons and Dragons kind of themed. It allows you to be able to do melee combat, it allows you to be able to cast spells, all that kind of good stuff. And so far the footage is absolutely amazing. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down all 6 classes that we've seen so far. I say so far because as much as I feel like these are going to be the 6 that we're going to actually see in the final game, there is a slight potential that we might actually see more. But we're going to wait for those hints. We're going to wait for some more videos to be able to drop about that. But before we get into it, make sure you drop a like on the channel, make sure you drop a subscribe. It really does mean the world to us. It really helps the channel out, and let's get right into it. So we're going to do the trailers as we've seen them, as they've been released, and we're going to do them in those orders. So therefore, first up we have the Stabbermancer. Now the Stabbermancer, we've only seen 2 skills, and we've seen 2 skills for pretty much every single class going forward. So it's going to be interesting to know if it's going to be more like Borderlands 3, in which case we actually had 3 skills to be able to use, and I think they added in a 4th through DLC in time. So maybe that's the way they were actually going to develop classes over the course of like DLC or something like that. But as far as we're aware, we've only had the 2 released for every single one of the classes. So we'll just cover the 2, and then we may be able to do like speculation in another video as to what else they could potentially do, just to keep in theme with these kind of current classes. So the first one we have is the Stabbermancer, and the Stabbermancer, from what we've seen in the trailer, has the spell off Ghostblade, which is an AoE damage spell, and it's from what we can tell in the trailer, it's an instant cast wherever you kind of like aim your weapon at. So if you're looking at an enemy and you cast it, it instantly teleports to there, and it just spins around a couple of like blades just to be able to do damage, and it looks like it stays there. It doesn't seem to move it in any kind of way or any kind of shape or form. It just stays there, just dealing AoE until it eventually runs out. From what we can tell, you can also have 2 out in the same time. We don't know if that's going to be something that's going to be in the class tree, for example, or if you're just going to be able to have 2 as standard, but it just spins in place, does quite a bit of damage, and from what we can tell, and this might just be because it's the kind of like the trailer just to be able to show off, it seems to be kind of a really high damaging kind of spell because it just pretty much instant killed some of the enemies anyway. So but that could be just be able to show it off to be able to see it's doing quite high damage, and it's definitely a skill that's definitely usable in that kind of sense. Next up we have From the Shadows. Now From the Shadows is very similar to Fade Away from what I can see, which is if you've played Borderlands 3 and you've played Flak and you're kind of accustomed to his skills. Fade Away puts you in stealth mode, and you gain increased damage while you're currently stealth. So in the trailer, it allows you to be able to show you that obviously you can do a melee attack, you can do it seems to stay in stealth when you do that, so it'll be interesting to see if it's like guns that actually take you out of it, or it's a predetermined set of time, etc, etc. I know when it came to Fade Away for Flak, you were able to change how its kind of properties worked, so you could stay in there for a duration of time rather than a certain amount of shots or something like that. So maybe we're going to have something along the same kind of lines when it comes to into the Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Next up we've got the Berserker, which is kind of a frost-themed class, so it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to be able to do like crowd control, to be able to do like slowdowns, all that kind of thing. So the 2 abilities that we managed to see were Feral Surge, which is a jump-forward ground attack, seems to send out kind of an elemental shockwave. Now in the trailer it seemed to be just purely frost, it seemed to do a lot of freeze. It'll be interesting to see if we can actually change that up, but considering the name is Berserker, it kind of makes sense that it will just be purely frost. But overall, you seem to be able to jump a decent kind of like ability, kind of like length, and the AoE seems pretty strong, so it looks like it's going to be it's going to be very forgiving in case your aim isn't that very good. Next up we've also got Dreadwind, and what this does is if you've ever played Outriders and you play the Trickster, it basically is kind of like the Cyclone ability in that, where you spin your melee weapon around to be able to inflict damage, and you seem to have some kind of movement control while you're spinning, so you are going to be able to direct yourself towards like a group of enemies. You are going to be able to maximize the pure damage potential by slowly walking, kind of like spinning towards them. So overall, I think this is a very good class. I don't think this is going to be my primary class, but I can see this potentially having a lot of fun if you do get into like a second spec, and obviously we'll touch on that a little bit later because they have mentioned that you are able to double spec into some of these classes, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of combinations we can actually come up with. So that pretty much wrapped up everything that was in Trailer 1, which is a very good teaser, and obviously at the time it got a lot of people hyped for this game. So we did actually have Trailer 2 drop. Now Trailer 2 dropped another couple of classes for us to be able to look at, and the first of which was Spellshot. Now Spellshot seems to be the main class that you want to be able to go for if spells are going to be your thing, because it allows you to be able to have the ability of ambidextrous, which seems to be able to dual wield spells rather than have another gun or a melee equipped in one of your hands. So therefore you are able to, we haven't seen like a full list or given any kind of like real hints or names or like actual abilities to be able to do with the spells. We've only seen some gameplay footage, but they seem pretty useful, they seem pretty damaging, so it kind of makes sense that ambidextrous will be like a dual wielding version, almost like the brr-zerker that was back in Borderlands 2, where you were able to dual wield your like guns, so you were able to have like 2 pistols or 2 rocket launchers, etc, etc. This is basically like the spell version of that, so therefore it's going to be very interesting to see how the spells really play out and if they're actually viable to actually run dual wield in that kind of sense. And then next up we also have the polymorph ability, which is some kind of like transmodifier of an enemy into a harmless creature, which allows you to be able to do easy killing. We're unsure at this moment in time, because of how short the trailer actually showed it off, if there's any kind of like duration limit on that, or if they're like permanently transformed, or how the cooldown kind of really works on that ability. So it'd be interesting to see how we can really modify that into, because obviously skills in Borderlands are definitely moddable. You're able to change how they actually interact and all that kind of thing. It'd be very interesting to see if we can do like an AoE version of this, maybe turn them into the same kind of enemy as all that kind of thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of plays out, and I think Spellshot is probably going to be the one to keep your eye on, because if spells are actually really, really good, then Spellshot is going to see a lot of use. If spells turn out to actually not be as viable, they're still kind of like more of like a utility, almost like a grenade in a way, then Spellshot might not necessarily see too much play, but that one I think is going to be probably the one to be able to balance in this game. And then lastly on Trailer 2 we had Clawbringer, and Clawbringer was the first one to actually show us that you are able to gain followers in this game. And as Clawbringer, you gain a tiny dragon to be able to follow you around all the time. It's unclear as to if they actually do damage, if they're just purely there for aesthetics, if they go collect loot, etc, etc. So that's something we're also going to keep an eye on, just to be able to see if there's something we can actually report on that, just like in future trailers. But the first ability we were able to see for Clawbringer was Cleansing Flames. Now, this was a powerful AoE hammer swing, but it doesn't seem like you get much movement during the casting, so as soon as you pretty much press that button, you're kind of locked in there for a couple of seconds while you do the animation, and obviously bring the hammer down. Now, in terms of like the AoE, that seems to be a decent amount. Obviously the damage, because this is a kind of like a trailer to be able to show off the abilities, and obviously enemies are supposed to be dying, it's kind of unclear as to how much damage this will actually do in the end, but overall, I think this is going to be a fun ability to be able to use, and I think it really pairs well in terms of like a close range ability when we've got the long range ability, which is coming up next, which is Storm Dragon's Judgment. Now, what that means is you're able to throw a hammer at a location. This seems to be a separate hammer. This is one that your character always carries around, so I assume you can't swap these out whatsoever. And you throw the hammer, it goes to a location, it sticks into the environment, so it just stays there, and kind of produces almost like a shock force field that does AoE shock damage over the time that it's pretty much there, and you are able to recall this at will to then actually, as it travels back, if it hits any enemies on the way back, it will also deal damage to them as well. I think this is probably going to be my main class that I'm going to start out with. I think Clawbringer is looks very fun to be able to actually use, and I like the combination of melee and ranged, and I think that kind of like gives them all like a nice kind of like jack of all trades in that kind of sense. But obviously the skill trees, once we get to see them, get to mess about with them, I think that will really give us the idea as to which one's going to be the most viable. And then lastly we have Trailer 3, which I think dropped at the very end of January, which did bring 2 more classes for us to be able to look at, and the first of which kind of had a little bit of interest around it, just purely based on the resource mechanic that this one's going to be using, and that's Graveborn. Now, Graveborn seems to have the ability of Reaper of Bones, which you gain lifesteal, you gain extra magic damage, but you're consistently losing health while this is happening. So you'll have like a red hue over the corners of your HUD, you'll have it over the weapon model, so it's going to be very clear as to when this ability is going to be active, but you should be dealing more damage. It's almost like a rage-based kind of thing. It reminds me so much of Krieg back in Borderlands 2, but obviously I don't think Krieg really had anything that reduced his health that much. I think he just purely gained extra bonuses when he was at low health. So it's going to be interesting to see if this one's actually going to make up for the difference and obviously make up for the fact that you're consistently losing health. Is the damage boost going to be enough? Is it actually something that's going to be definitely viable to actually spec into? And if it is, because you're able to spec into 2 classes, is it going to be something worthwhile that you can actually go into the Graveborn along with any of the other classes and you're always going to see a nice damage boost? I'm very interested to see how this one kind of works, but obviously we'll know more as soon as the game kind of drops. And then lastly we have Dire Sacrifice, which at the cost of 20% of your current health. So from that wording, that tells me that you can't kill yourself with this ability. So if you're, let's say you're at 19% of your health, so you had 100 health and you're at 19, you can't use 20% of your current of your full health, because obviously that will put you in a down but not out situation. I think what that tells me is that you'll have to use 20% of that 19 health. So you can consistently keep using it to be able to do that. But this will deal magic damage in an area of effect around yourself. And, you know, it seems, once again, it seems kind of damaging, but we'll see the damage numbers once the full game does actually drop. But you see, in this class, you do gain a kind of floating skull, and you gain that as a follower. So once again, it's kind of unclear if they're actually going to do damage or actually collect anything, or it's just there for looks. But you definitely can have that one in this class. And then the very last class that we've actually seen so far is Spore Warden, and Spore Warden is looks to take upon the role of like the Ranger in terms of like Dungeons and Dragons or RPG kind of roles. So the first ability that Spore Warden seems to bring with them is the Barrage of Arrows, and this is a range attack that fires 7 arrows. And from what I can tell in the trailer, it's either fired in a very tight area, because I was expecting it to be kind of like a horizontal line, and that means that you're able to take out multiple enemies, but it seemed to just focus on one enemy. That was pretty much where the crosshair was. So it's either a case of it focusing in a tight area, or it kind of targets an individual enemy to fire all 7 of those arrows. It'd be interesting to see if we can actually mess about with that and actually make it so it is like a horizontal line, so you can actually deal with a few more enemies rather than just the one. But I suppose we'll see that as we know a few more details when it comes out. And the last ability that we've got seen for Spore Warden was Blizzard, which creates 3 cyclones that seek enemies. And when it's activated, it seems to cast at the feet of some enemies, and then from there it actually does then go and seek. So it's almost like the Blade one for got like Ghost Blade for Stabbermancer. So basically you can activate it and it will literally be on that enemy, and then from there this one will actually start moving and it will actually go and seek out a few more enemies to be able to go and target. The last thing for Spore Warden is that you do gain a mushroom follower. So we've only got confirmation that 3 of the classes actually have followers. It'll be interesting to see if maybe they just left that detail out when it came to the others, and every single class does actually have the ability to have a follower, or if it is just only 3 out of the 6 that we've seen so far just gain that access to that follower kind of side of things. But obviously this is still early days. The game's not coming out for another at least like month and a half, so therefore there's plenty of time for them to be able to give us a bit more material to be able to have a look into. But overall, I'm absolutely loving the class system that's currently at play here, and the fact that we can spec into 2 different ones, so you can start combining some of these abilities and kind of followers and all that kind of thing, I think is absolutely amazing, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands stuck into this. The fact that I can go as a Clawbringer that can then sacrifice some of the health to be able to deal additional damage, to be able to gain life leech, all that kind of thing, I think it's really going to be, depending on how they do the end game for this game, I think it's really going to mix up the team synergy. I think it's going to be a great start to be able to get our hands into and be able to find all these combinations. So rather than it just being a case of this is one class, this is the builds, these are the best ones for it, we're actually going to be having a little bit different ways to be able to actually do builds in this, and I'm absolutely loving it, and I really cannot wait for this game to actually drop. So that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope you've learned something useful with ourselves, and hopefully there's something that you may have missed in the trailers. Maybe there's something a little bit more to do with the classes. I want to know what your thoughts are when it comes to the classes, which ones are taking your fancy, which one kind of like has taken your eye, and well, like I said, there are double classes, so which ones would you combine and think would actually work really, really well together? We definitely are going to be covering some kind of form of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands on this channel, so definitely keep your eyes peeled, definitely make sure you are subscribed to the channel, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you around when that obviously drops in just over a month's time. But thank you all so much for watching to the end of the video. Thank you all so much to the Babylonian family, as always. Their names appear at the end of the video, and that just leaves me to say, as always, keep yourselves safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on our next video.